Hello everybody, and welcome back to HR Tech Trailblazers. This is Nico Simko, the co-founder and the CEO of Claire. Today I'm super excited to have Kurt from Pinwheel here. He's the co-founder and the CEO. Pinwheel is one of the companies that I've been most excited about since we started Claire. I've known Kurt for a very long time, and what Pinwheel does in a nutshell is they're trying to connect the world of HR tech data to the world of financial services in a way that basically unlocks products that today we don't see, and also gives a lot more power to consumers to be in control of their own financial services. Pinwheel is a fast-growing company. They've raised over $75 million. They're very well known in the New York fintech ecosystem. And with that, Kurt, welcome to HR Tech Trailblazers.
Really happy to be here. That was a fantastic intro. You pitch a company better than I could pitch it myself. So,
well, super excited. Well, let's talk a little bit about the company. Kurt, you are, you've been in the startup ecosystem. You're part of a company that got sold, and then after that, you decided to found Pinwheel. The first question: why did you found Pinwheel?
So it actually is related to when we got bought. So our last startup was bought by Volvo, the car manufacturer. And when we were there, my co-founder and I, for the first time in our entire lives, had received HSAs, health savings accounts. And what we realized with these things is that, especially back in, this is 2018, these things were terrible, right? Like, how do I put money into this thing? When can I use it? Like, what is actually eligible and not eligible? How do I know and keep track of everything? And so we actually had this idea of, what if you could build an automated HSA? And then as you started to go down that path, we quickly realized that there was a much bigger problem, which is if you want to build not only like an automated HSA or like basically any real fintech app, you need a ton of data, right? And there's this huge gap missing of payroll data. So like you can't build this HSA app without connecting into a payroll account and seeing like, are they still employed? How much money have they made? Like how can you do contributions, et cetera, et cetera. And we looked around high and low and we're like, there has to be somebody who has built this before. There's no way this is just like a greenfield opportunity. But we realized that there was literally no one who had built the pipes from where that data sits in these payroll systems to the like financial services apps in the world. And so that's when we pivoted into what we do today.
Why was it greenfield? What was so hard maybe about this problem if it's so obvious that no one kind of tried to tackle it?
Yeah, so I think the important thing is to take a step back to really understand the ecosystem writ large at first. When you think about what payroll systems are, we call them walled gardens because, as you know, like if you look inside an ADP or a Workday or what have you, there's such immense amounts of data, not only around each employee, but around employers as well, right? And that data is like everything from their identity to their income, to their employment, to their taxes, and the list goes on and on. And the problem is that data sits locked away, right? That's the exact data that you need to run your financial life, right? You want to get a credit card, you want to open a bank account, you want to get a mortgage, you want to rent an apartment, you have to have all this information, which is why like even now in 2025, we're still like literally downloading pay stubs and W-2s and like bringing these docs to lenders to be like, hey, like, can you verify me? I promise I'm legit, right? And it's crazy. It's crazy that data doesn't flow smoothly back and forth.
Yep.
And so that space we realized hadn't really been solved effectively because number one, for the longest time, payroll systems weren't actually cloud-based. They were like on-prem or in other ways, like the data was kind of locked away in a way that was hard to share. And then two is as the ecosystem started to grow, the other big problem is that there was a lot of murkiness around like data ownership, right? Like, is it the employee's data? Is it the employer's data? Is it the payroll system's data? How do you clearly define those lines?
Yep.
And then how do you share data in a way that's really responsible, right? And I think it was only recently, and I want to give a shout out to Plaid because I feel like they were one of the first people who really pushed the boundaries on like, not the boundaries, but pushed the envelope on really being clear about consumer permission.
Yeah.
And them kind of breaking through the wall has created a different ecosystem where folks can actually be like, hey, like this is my data. I should have the ability to share it with who I want, when I want, especially if it helps me get better financial products.
Yeah, well, maybe let's talk a little bit about that, breaking the wall. I really like kind of the words you're using here. It's basically, if I read it back to you, it's the idea that me as a consumer, I need all of this information that sits in multiple payroll systems if I've had multiple jobs, and my employer changes payroll systems from time to time, and then suddenly like for example, a week ago I filed my taxes. I ended up spending all this time downloading docs to file my taxes. And suddenly our financial life as consumers, right, should be able to not have this wall of connectivity. Can you talk a little bit about what has worked so far in breaking that wall and what are still challenges to overcome?
It's a great question. So I think one of the things that I find most interesting is that, you know how there's this thesis that every company will eventually become a fintech company?
Yes.
Right? I think that is...
We love that idea, by the way, so yes.
Totally agree, right? And like it'll take different flavors, right? But I think the world is really moving in that direction. You start to see everyone trying to verticalize, and if you have that customer relationship, you want to be able to be more than just one service provider to them, right? So I totally believe that thesis, and I think payroll systems are trying to embrace that same idea, where they say, okay, our core customer is the employer, but we have all these employees who really need access to their wages or want to be able to access better financial products, and we can help them with that.
Yes.
And so they start rolling out, people have launched their own wallets, they launch a bunch of services directly to the employees via the employer, et cetera. And I think it's a really interesting way that the industry is going. The issue, though, is that people change jobs, right? And it's always like, if you bank with Chime, for example, and you really like that experience, and they offer you all these services, you don't. And I think the best example is like their MyPay product, right? Which is their instant cash advance product. If you are used to using that, you really don't want to go to, like, if you go from ADP to Workday to Paychex to whatever, you don't want to have to keep switching from an ADP wallet to a Paychex wallet to whatever wallet. And so there's always going to be some number of people who want to get that service provided by their financial service provider, right? And for that to happen, you need that connectivity.
Right.
The issue is that I don't necessarily believe, and I think the industry they're definitely going in the direction, but they're not there yet. I think they're having a hard time seeing that it isn't cannibalistic to their businesses, right?
Yes.
Like I can't tell you how many people I've talked to at leading payroll and HRIS companies who are very, very innovative in their own right. Yeah. But the moment you start talking about, oh, we're going to take data out of your ecosystem, they're like, oh, whoa, like that's our data, and it's like, I hear you, but like think about it from the consumer's perspective, right? Like it is undeniably a better experience to get it from your bank day in, day out versus to have to like churn and get a new product every time you switch companies. And I think like that's where the biggest blocker is getting them over the hump of like, it's not cannibalistic, it's really a safety net to catch all the folks who aren't using your products within your ecosystem.
Look, you and I think see similar data. Like we attack the problem from a different angle, which is we know that we're going to be a solution that's embedded within payroll workforce management, but the lifespan for a user we know is limited to 6 to 9 months, to exactly what you were talking about. And typically consumers will at onboarding say, can I bring in my own solution? Can I bring in my own card? And or when they leave, they're like, can I continue using it? And typically the answer is no. And that's why I'm excited about what you're building, is because in a non so distant future, these systems can talk to one another. And there is like a world of like, at onboarding or plus or post termination where these things can work together. Can you maybe give examples of when that has worked, maybe with leading innovative payroll platforms, like maybe payroll companies that you're very excited that are trailblazing in that space? Because you're talking about Plaid, they found a way to work with Venmo. I know at the very beginning, and they were focusing only on a few financial institutions. Like you almost need to start somewhere and see success, and then you scale from there.
Yeah, totally. First of all, I just want to say, and I'm not being paid to say this, Claire's an amazing company, amazing product.
Appreciate it.
I do think what's been really inspiring to see is, like, as you said, we've known each other for a long time, and seeing the progress that you've made, because I think we're in many ways fighting the same battle, right? Which is to help these larger institutions and companies realize that there is so much more that they can be building that is a win-win-win for the employees, for the employer, for the company, and everything. And like we tackle it from different angles, but the end goal is the same, right? Which is to empower consumers and ultimately benefit the whole system. And so been a huge fan, and I think we're like on the right track and we're making progress.
Let's make sure we record that.
Just take that one clip and put it everywhere.
And that is it.
And to your larger point, I think there's this really interesting thing that we've observed, which is this didn't exist even like 2 years ago, but in the past couple of years, I've seen some of the largest payroll providers in HRIS systems like ADP, like Paychex, like Workday, create literally standalone business units whose only mandate is to say, we have a treasure trove of data, how do we organize it and structure it and then create products around them that are outside of like the core remit of the business, right? And like, I think it's because of the work that we've been doing that they see there's a big opportunity here, and they get really excited about, let's like actually put resources behind it, right? Yeah. And so like off the back of that, I think what we have started to see is an openness to start piloting a whole host of things. So a couple examples are, we do direct deposit switching as a part of our core business. Basically, the friction of having to sign up for a new bank account, you have to take like a paper form to your HR team. It's messy, it's fraud-ridden, et cetera. And so we just build a direct connection into a payroll system. So the next time that a consumer goes to call it, Current or Cash App or Chime or American Express to switch their direct deposit over, they use us. It's a one-click switch, super easy. Fraud is reduced, everybody wins, right? It took us years and years and years to get people on board with that. I'm not going to name names, but a top 3 payroll provider, I went to go see their COO and I pitched him this whole thing. I'm like, imagine a world where, and he was like, listen, with all due respect, if you don't have enough revenue to give me, like, and I don't see enough zeros behind this, like, get the hell out of my office, you're wasting my time. And so we basically had to, claw our way, like in the pirate versus Navy, metaphor, like we were pirates, right? We were like, however we need to do to get the data, let's get the data and then prove that this model works. Yeah. And then we went back after 3 years post that conversation and said, look, we have like real revenue here, this thing works. And then they took it seriously. And then they put engineers behind it and then they opened up the APIs to make it work.
So cool. Yeah. That's so cool. I know how difficult it is to do something like that. And I know just, props to your team. Like, I know your team is known for having some of the best engineers and the best team to crack this problem. Let's talk about, there's a few different directions I want to take this because you talked about a lot of different stuff. So maybe let's take this first one. You talk a lot about, direct deposit switching. There was, whether it's the largest digital bank in the countries, kind of direct deposit switching with Pinwheel was like the thing that was happening in fintech. Can we double down on why did you use this use case first? You, as you said, this is a big theme. There's so many things you could be doing. Why direct deposit switching? Yeah,
it's actually super counterintuitive when you think about it, because when we first started, we had kind of outlined 3 different use cases. One was direct deposit switching. One was like just very simply income and employment verification, which if you ask 95% of investors, maybe 99% of investors, they would say, go there, right? Because the TAM is like 1,000x the size of direct deposit switching. And then the third was around using the paycheck to pay for loans, which I think is really interesting. But that one was clear that it would take a lot longer to get to. And it was just like a very, very nascent idea. And so we were choosing between the first 2. And I remember having a lot of conversations with our investors and my co-founders about this. And our general belief was like, there were already so many solutions in the income verification world that it felt a lot more like a 1 to 1.5. Whereas with direct deposit switching, it felt like a true 0 to 1. And we recognized that the market itself was nowhere near as big as income verification at that point. But our bet was that it would grow, right? And so I think we have been lucky in that that call was largely correct, in that once we started providing digital direct deposit switching, everyone was like, oh crap, I need this thing too. And so that's started to really like cascade, which has been great. But I do think it was ultimately when we were having, when we were talking to prospects and doing demand testing, the thing that was just so obvious was that when you talked about the income verification thing, they were like, oh yeah, like we use this, we use that, how are you different? And then when we were talking about the deposit switching, people were like leaning over the table, right? There was like such a clear hair on fire problem to be solved. And so we were like, listen, I would rather solve that thing that's really, really hair on fire for someone even if it's not as big of a market,
Right.
because we know that like demand is really going to be there, and to that end, like our retention on all mid-market to enterprise customers has been 100%. We haven't lost a single one.
Amazing.
Because of the demand is really there.
If you look at the use cases today, a few years in, you said you looked at 3, and then you had conversations with the, with the board or investors and your co-founders. How would you rank the use cases today, February 2025?
Yeah. I think the direct deposit switching stuff has been a really amazing wedge because it truly does solve a hair on fire problem for the customer. But we believe the much larger opportunity for the market is in the data and the use cases that unlocks. Not necessarily income verification. Like I'm sure the folks who have been in the industry long enough know that the bureaus, especially Equifax, has built direct partnerships with these payroll providers to do income verification. So that's a space that has, I think, already been fairly mature. We think it's actually more around the like real-time connectivity of these accounts to enable a whole host of other use cases, right? Like when you think about lending, whether it's in the form of earned wage access, which I guess is not technically a lending product,
Yes.
Or like short-term installments, credit cards, anything like that, you're always looking for the most up-to-date information about how much money does this person have, are they still employed, like has anything happened to their standing, and it's like the FICO score paradigm is very, very effective for people who are salaried and have consistent income. For the 60 million Americans who are gig workers, who are hourly, who don't have that kind of income stability, very, very hard for them to access credit because it's hard to underwrite them, right? And so we believe that that's actually the biggest opportunity in the market right now is having that real-time data to be able to see what's going on all the time. Is really where the opportunity is.
Okay, so let's almost double click on that use case. Because I transparently, as a consumer, or even if I look at like our user base at Claire, I would say we have hundreds of thousands, it's probably gonna get to the million soon, is like of users who've used Claire in the past have now graduated away. And they're like this kind of, I would say like beautiful world where any job you get, you can seamlessly connect your financial services. I want to live in that world. Like I want to live in that world. I can see so many use cases, for me, I can see so many use cases for my user base. What is missing for this world to exist?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, there needs to become a inflection in the market relative to the payroll and HRIS systems being willing to take the next big step forward in terms of opening things up. I think they're starting to, but they're still very, very far away from it. And I think it just takes 1 or 2 brave souls to go out there. And I think we're very close, right? Actually, like I think a lot of it should, not a lot of it, 1 or 2 of them should really happen this year where we go beyond just like what we have today. And whether it's like in enabling direct-to-consumer earned wage access or real-time lending, we'll get some of those this year. And my hope is that seeing those proof points in the market allow all the people who don't want to be the first ones through the wall to say, okay, this is legit, we're good, these are trusted names out there pushing the boundaries, and we know we can do this too. Because I think once you have an open ecosystem, the rest of it will happen really, really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's, if I don't know, if I'm somebody who doesn't know much about financial services, I recognize now this brand called Plaid, and I can connect my bank account to any financial app I want. And it seemed like they very quickly gained the market. Maybe to double down, like on this one is, it seems like we need a few HRS providers to kind of jump in, but how, like for anybody who, let's say that you're talking to somebody who is an HRIS leader, like, are you talking to them in terms of revenue opportunity? Are you talking, like, how do you get them over the hump? Because a lot of them look at this, right? And they're like, oh, that's an interesting concept. Like, yes, I have all this data. I can potentially monetize it. I can make better products. I can be loved by my customers because they know they can connect it. There's so many arguments for them to do it. How do you get them over the hump?
So there's 3 different things that I've seen be effective, and I think it's actually, you have to use all 3 of them. Number 1 is, money talks. Financial incentives do matter. And I think being able to put a big enough use case on the table for them where they see the opportunity, they see the market size, and they say, okay, if we invest in this, this is going to pay off dividends, right?
Yes. Yes.
I think that's the area where we've seen the most success is saying, listen, like, if you can enable this real-time data to allow for any, not just any fintech or neobank, any bank period to offer true earned wage access, right? Like one thing that just is worth decoding for folks who don't understand this concept, to put it more simply, like if I am someone who doesn't want to get my early access to wages or earned wages from my payroll provider or from my HRIS system, and I go to, let's say, Chime, right? And I say, I sign up for an account, I'm like, great, I would love to, I work my 8 hours today, can I get paid today?
Yes.
How is Chime going to say yes? Right? They need to know, are you still employed? Did you actually work those hours? When are you going to get paid? Yes. How many hours have you already accrued? Like, when's that direct deposit going to come? Where is it going, et cetera? If they can get all the information, they can instantaneously say, yeah, you know what? You worked your 8 hours, we saw that, here's your $200, right? And that could be Chime, that could be Wells Fargo, that could be anybody.
Right.
And so if you think about that idea, like it makes a ton of sense. And better yet, the payroll providers of the HRIS systems can get paid for sharing the data, right? And so like, once you understand that, I think it's like, okay, like there's nothing that it takes away from your core business. It only makes your employees benefit, et cetera. And so there's a really powerful aligned incentives there. That's one. Two is, what we've heard from a lot of people is like, listen, these feel like side quests, right? Like this does not help my core business. I'm here to serve employers first and foremost. And I don't see how this helps my employers, right? And the thing that I keep pointing to is there's a reason why like earned wage access is such a massively popular product, right? Yes. Like it increases engagement, it increases retention. You know this better than anybody, right? And so like it's like, listen, like you are saving the employer so much money in terms of like reduced turnover, reduced like recruitment and replacement costs, et cetera, et cetera. The increased engagement means more productivity. Like these things have been studied and it's proven, right? And so like offering stuff like this has downstream effects. It may not be as direct or obvious, but if you just think about it for a second, like it obviously carries all the way through. Yeah. And by the way, like it'll improve your sales cycles and increase potentially your average, deal size, et cetera, et cetera. And the third way, which I don't like because I always believe carrots are much better than sticks, is like I do think, maybe not in this administration, but in some future world, there will be a world where you can't argue that this is not the consumer's data.
Yes. And
especially where 1033 was going for a long time. This eventually, sooner or later, there will be clarity that like this is the consumer's information, who you are, how much you make, where you work. That's your information.
Yes.
And you should be able to share it with who you want, how you want, probably at no cost.
Yeah.
So like if that happens in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, it's going to happen. And wouldn't you rather be on the side of it where you've commercialized it and built it out in a way that you can really benefit from the ecosystem growing versus being told by a regulator, you know what, like you need to do this and now you can't charge for it because it's supposed to be something that you do anyway, right?
Yeah. Okay, amazing. So let's say that now we live in a world where all the HRS systems, either because of, federal guidance or because, now suddenly they all do it because it's the thing that everybody does. And you're connected to all the payroll systems out there and in general HRIS systems. What are, how do you then take this and make Pinwheel as big as it can possibly be? Draw me the vision. Yeah. Now that the connection is done, and that is so hard to do, draw me the vision for Pinwheel long term.
Yeah, so kind of like what you were saying, I really believe in this idea of like portability, right? So like we call it a like income or employment passport, but the idea basically is that like the really, really unfortunate thing that we've seen over decades is that there is a class of folks which is getting ever bigger as a percentage of the total population that is never going to get to a level where they can achieve they're never gonna get a mortgage. They're never gonna be able to like reach a level of like financial wealth where they can just sit and retire and be fine, which is really sad, but like that is kind of the reality where we live. And not to make this a podcast about macroeconomic policy, so I'll put that aside for a second. But the truth is those folks are always going to need access to products that don't align with I would argue most banks, right? Like one thing that people forget to and don't really understand or don't give it enough thought, I would say, is you know how they claim this, like, the number used to be around like 2019, 20 to 25% of the entire country was either underbanked or unbanked entirely, right? That wasn't an accident. It was because a large of these large institutions were like, these people are not profitable for the business. We do not serve them because we can't make hay out of this. And that's why folks like Chime and Cash App and Current and all these folks popped up and said, this is an audience that we can serve, but you have to understand that the way you monetize on these people and the way that you serve them is fundamentally different. They're never gonna get to a mortgage. How do you still lend to them in a way that helps their lives and improves their well-being? And so we believe that if you can create this like real-time identity tied to all this like income and employment, and it can get passed through to any service provider, it's basically like part of like your digital ID for the rest of your life, right?
Exactly. Great. Just because of the era that we live in, I have to talk to you about AI.
Please.
So we're going to talk about AI for a little bit. How is AI, if in any way, impacting what you're doing day to day?
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I do feel like we are at the precipice of something really, really big. I'm personally an angel investor in a number of companies, and I see the growth rates of these things, and I'm like, revenue is supposed to be the ultimate arbiter of value, right? And I'm like, you see like 0 to 60, 0 to 100, 0 to 80 in like in a matter of like 9 months to a year, and I'm like, this can't all be like like fake, right? Like I think one of the things that you should be thoughtful about just understanding like the AI market writ large is that we haven't gone deep enough in the cycle to really see the retention on this revenue, but there's undoubtedly overwhelming demand for these products. And so when I sit here and I look at that, I'm like, okay, like we can't ignore that. And at the same time, I also feel like, especially in regulated industries, it's really hard to apply AI right now because you have to be so sensitive about all the data that you do. So what we've basically done is tried to start with what we call phase one, which is just adopting all the tools that we know can make us more efficient. So like using AR SDRs for like outbounding and marketing, using AI tools for customer success, just making their internal operations much more efficient. That's like the low-hanging fruit, very obvious. We actually did a hackathon where like everybody came and like just came up with ideas, and I think it just kickstarted this kind of cultural prioritization of like we have to do AI stuff. And then from there, people felt more empowered to do other things, and that kind of cascaded. Now we have a Slack channel that literally is just people constantly sharing ideas around what they've done with AI. So I think that's
a great idea, actually. Like getting everybody to talk about what they're seeing in AI, because it moves so fast, right? You have so many products, like the speed of development is super high. So that's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, and I think what it's done is even the smallest thing like anything at all, even if it's just like you use this to write an email, share it in the channel, and it just gets other people to be like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, right? So cool. So that's been cool. And then I would say like longer term, I ask this question to our team all the time, like in a world where AI becomes native to financial services, what does it actually look like?
And great question.
To be perfectly honest, I have no freaking clue, right? Like, because it's really hard in financial services. Because unlike, it's very obvious to see, like if I had a conversational AI for me to like help me like do my chores and like write my emails and like that stuff, it's like very easy to comprehend. In financial services, like this thing holds your money.
Right.
You spend it, you save it, you invest it. Like there's already like a bunch of robo-advisors and stuff. And like, I'm not actually totally sure where it goes. And it's one of these things where I almost feel like, I feel really guilty that we don't have a better idea of like where it's supposed to be going. But I also I feel like in a regulated world, we're always gonna be the last ones to adopt technology, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that my last banking job, I think it was in when I left, it was like 2019. I was using Windows 2010. So absolutely, if Windows cannot be adopted, fast enough, then imagine AI. But anyways, that's a different topic. Kurt, what should I be asking you that's relevant either for the financial, like the people who listen to this is financial technology providers and people who work in product at, large HRS providers. Like, is there anything that I didn't ask that you think is relevant for this crowd to listen to?
I think one thing I just want to reiterate is that it requires cooperation from the whole ecosystem for this to be successful. And the funny thing is when I talk to everybody, I don't think I've ever come across someone who doesn't believe in the end vision of what we're trying to achieve out here, right? Like everyone believes in consumer empowerment. Everybody believes in better financial products. Everyone believes in like building more secure, more efficient pipes to share data. And so it's one of these things where I'm like, if we all agree, this isn't like some weird like partisan issue where like, right? Like we all agree, we're all motivated to do this, especially if the commercial incentives align. Like it just requires people to, step up, have some courage to like push through, right?
Yes.
I think we're close. I really think we're pretty close.
I love it. And maybe that's a great place to end. I think like the reason why we do these chats and we have so many different points of views on certain times the same issue is because we're really at the very beginning of how financial services, especially for consumers, is going to change over the next few years, and it's going to require like great ideas followed by good funding, followed by amazing teams and a lot of perseverance, because solving difficult issues takes time. And so with that, Kurt, thank you for making the time for this.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.